Hello, welcome back guys. And in the previous video we designed app table component, and in this video we are going to use that app table component to show our list item, book list item in the book list page. So without wasting much time, let's get into code and we'll see how we can use this app table component. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back inside views folder, and there we have the book list over there, right? So now here I'm going to use that app list page, right? Not app list, but the app table component, which is of course going to render the list item, right? For that I need a separate row over here. So I'll say iron row, right? See, this row is just responsible for searching the data, and we have couple of button over there, but we need one row to show all those data as a list item, right? So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, inside this row I'm going to use app table. For that we need to import app table component. So I'll say app table. We all know that how we can import the component which we created above. Okay, so I'll say app table, and then of course we need to register this component in the component block. So I'll say app table. Cool. Now I should be able to use this app table component over here, and how we can use that, let's see that here. So what I'm going to do is I'll say app and then table, right? Cool. And then what else we are going to do? Of course we are going to provide all those components, not the component but all those props which we want to provide to app table. And what are those details we want to provide? So I'll say, okay, let me just not like this. I'll say, okay, you want props, I'm going to give you props, and we are going to bind it dynamically. So app table needs columns. Okay, so we are going to provide columns, and from where these columns will be coming, we'll define these columns below. First let's assign this. So I'll say get columns config. You can name it whatever you want, but the data should be in the expected format. And then it's also accepting the data. How you can see that, just hover on this app table component and you will be able to see all those props which you have defined over there. Or else you can go back to this app table component, right, and then see what props you want to accept there. So I'll say this time data will be coming from, let's say, get. Okay, I'm just assigning empty array as of now. Okay, I'll define the data source later, but for now I'm going to say, okay, pagination should be true. So I'll say pagination as true. All right, and then let's make it false. When we'll make our API changes according to the pagination, then we'll be making it true, and then we'll see if those button is getting visible over there or not. Okay, so at very initial thing, this table should be actually working fine without this pagination data and all. So next thing I'm going to say total, and then records. Of course total records is going to be, let's say this time I'm going to give 100. We don't care about total record as of now because there's no pagination at all, so we won't be seeing those pagination button over there. Okay, and then what else we need limit as well. So by default I'll say, okay, we have limit of 10, right, but this all should be coming from actual API. Okay, not API but limit should we should define a certain limit in our application. Okay, but the total record should always be coming from the API, right? So limit is there. Then we can say, okay, page number should also be there. So I'll say page number, and then in this case page number I'm going to say 1. Okay, we can have a number of page number there, but this time I'm going to say page 1 because pagination I kept as a false, right? We'll talk on pagination once this is working fine. So now what next I'm going to assign is, I'm going to say, okay, table height is also there. So I'll say table height, and then this time I'm going to say, okay, table height will be, let's say, 60 view height. Okay, I just want to make it bit small, so not like this. I'll say 60 view height. Cool. Now next thing what it needs is, okay, not need, but we need to attach couple of listener over there. And why? Because it will emit couple of events, right? And what are all those events? Let's say it will emit, let me go back here on sorting. First thing is, here is the app table component, and you can see in the method over here. So when we click on sorting, which event it will emit? It will emit sort. So for that, we know how we can attach a listener for the sort event. We'll just say @sort, and then we should have a method which will capture those events and it will perform its functionality. So I'll say on sort, and then this sort should have defined here, right? That's the beauty of making component. So I'll say event, right? This event will have all those data. Cool. I'll just console it for now. I'll show you how it will work. So event, let me just save it, and then I'll go back here. Now this sort is sorted. We need a couple of more load page numbers. So I'll say load page number, okay, and then there should be an event listener as well here. So I'll say, let's say on page change, right? So again I need to define this method on page change. So I'll say, okay, we should have a on page change method as well, and then the data will be coming over there. So I'll just say console log event. Even this doesn't make sense in this case because we are not going to show that page number now. We'll see that after this session. Okay, at least we should have some data over there, then we are going to paginate over those data and we can make it more efficient, right? So now next thing, one more event will be there. So let's say limit, not limit, let's say on limit change, right? So one more functionality should be here to handle this limit change. So I'll say limit change, right? I'm going to just define this as well here. So what I'll say here is on limit change, and then here also we'll be receiving those events, and of course the event will have data. So I'll say event. Cool. Now the final thing, we can see here we have defined all those property, we have attached all those property to this app table component, but we need one more thing over here which we forgot, is the slot which we have defined over there, right? And this slot will have the action button, right? So what we'll do is we'll go back in book list, and how we can pass a slot, we saw that already how we can pass a slot, but we saw in the case of default slot how we can pass the name slot, right? So for that we need to use template again. So I'll say template, okay, template, right? And then inside this template I need to say which slot I'm going to use, okay, but this time the slot name is going to be action. That's what we defined there, right? Not action, but let me go back and confirm it. Action buttons, right? The same props name I'm going to use here. So v slot column and then the name of the specific slot. So I'm going to select, I'm going to say action buttons, right? Now once I'll assign this, then we will be having the slot data here, and what will be exactly that. So I'll say row data. Why? Because if you'll go back here, you can say you are assigning, you're binding row data over there, right? And then that row data will have row and the row index, correct? That's the beauty of slot. You can make a reusable component and then you can inject custom element over there. Okay, so we'll have row data here, and then using this row data I will be triggering the function. And how I can do that, let's see that in action. So here I'm going to use icon as well. So for that, what I'll say is use icon, right? So we have icon, and then what else we need here? We need two icon over here. One is for view, I outline, and then another one is for delete. So what I'll say here is data. I'm just going to say I outline. Okay, and then I'll say trash bin outline. Cool. Now the same icon I'm going to use here. So I'll say iron icon, right? Iron icon, and in this case I'm going to say okay, the icon will be view icon. So for that I'm going to use I outline. Cool. And then class also I'm going to attach, and this time I'll say action button, action button, right? And the background is going to be blue, and then on click of this specific icon there should some functionality which will get triggered. So what I'm going to say is on action icon, on action icon click. Okay, and here I'm just going to provide the name of the icon. So not the name of the icon but the operation of the icon. So this is going to view, so I'll say view, and then this is just the functionality which I want to make. If you want to make it in different way, you are always free to do that. Okay, you can just play with those data. So I'll say okay, row data will be having, so row data, and then I will have the row with actual data, and that is coming from here, right? So row data dot row, and then I will have index as well. So I'll say index of the specific row. So in this case I'm going to say okay, row data, again I'm going to use row data, and then I will have row index which I have binded in the app table component, right? That's cool. And then I'll just copy and paste it, and here what I'm going to say is okay, view is there, now this time delete should be there, right? And then the data and the row also we need to pass that same. I'll just copy this function. We need to have this function in this component, and then in this case I'm going to say okay, we need bg red, since the icon should be in delete icon should be in red. So let me first define this function over here. I'll say on action icon click. So first parameter is of course operation, and then second parameter is the data. So let me say value, let's say. All right, and then what I'll do is I'll use switch statement over here, and here I'll switch, not action, switch operation. Cool. And then in case of view, what I'm going to do, let's say view, in case of view, this should open that specific detail page, right? That's what my expectation is. If you want to do something else, you can of course do that. So I'll do that specific functionality later, but for now I'm just going to say console log open the specific detail page. But let's say since we have that add book page ready over there, so I can just say this dot router dot push, we can go to the specific page, right? And how we can go there is of course we can say okay, just route to what was the route of this add book page. Let's go back in router, and then we can say okay, this was the route of the page. So I'll just copy that and I'll come back in view list. Here I'll just paste this route, but in place of underscore id we need to have the actual id. And how we can take that, of course we have value over here, so this value will have data, and then data will have underscore id. So for that I'm just going to use backtick so that I can interpolate string. So I'll say okay, value dot data dot underscore id, or it may have value dot data dot id, right? That is it. And then we have one more option over there for deleting. So what I'll do is, let me just align it properly. Okay, so in case of delete, what I'm going to say as of now is just delete this data. So for that what we need to do is we need to integrate those APIs, delete APIs over here, and since we have the delete, we'll use that. So I'll say delete this data, right? I'll save it, and boom, we are done with how we can use our app table. And then one more thing over here is, of course, the data which we have provided, it is always empty array, but this time the data should be coming from the API, right? And we know that where we are going to use the API, where we are going to call the API, right? So for that we need to go back into the store and the book store, right? We have actions over there. So here what I'm going to say is, okay, we have create book functionality. Now I need get all books as well. Okay, and then the similar thing, commit and dispatch. I don't need dispatch over here, I just need commit. And then I'll say filters. Later in the program I'm going to use filters. That means that list should be filtered based on certain criteria, so I will be passing those filters. That's why I kept these filters for now, but as of now I'm not going to use it, so let it be as it is. We'll use that later. So I'll say books, and then I'll use this API dot get books, not book by ID but get books. Fine. So it is expecting the data, so I'll say data is going to be filters. Okay, or you can say empty object, and then app options is going to be, let's say, empty object. Of course this is optional, so we don't need to provide those data and all, so still you can remove this data. And then here what I'm going to say is, okay, when we'll have this book data, I'm going to commit this data to the using mutation to the state, so that that specific stored will get changed with the latest data. So in that case we need to go here, and then we need to use this books, right? So I'll say, okay, use this, commit this mutation with this data, books. Cool? Are we good? Right? So let me just save it. Okay, we need comma here. Let me just save it, and then you can see here we have get all books ready over there. Let me copy it and make couple of more function, which is of course get book by ID and delete. Get book by ID, not small I but capital ID, and this time I'm going to, of course, filter will be there, and then I'll say not filter this time, simply, okay, let it be filters. So I'll say just get books, and the data, it should have this ID, so I'll say filters itself. And then this time I'm going to say set opened book, I believe, set book, and set, not set book but the set opened book. Okay, fine. So this time we won't be having books, we'll be having a single book, so I'll say book. Let me save it, and we'll see what data we are getting. Okay, and if we are not getting structured data, we'll make that as a structured data as well. We'll see all those things in this video. So we are done with this. Let me save this, and then we should be able to call this function on our book list page, right? So here, what, not here, but we are going to use these getters, right? Once we have all those books, this getter should be responsible for the reactive data of the book. We all know that, we learned that in the Vuex video, right? If you don't know, you can go back and see that Vuex video, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, use this get books, but for that, for using that getter, we need to import that getter. How we can do that? We are also going to say import and map getters, right? So here what I'll say, from where, of course it is going to be imported from Vuex, and then this map getter should be mapped to computed, but we don't have computed here, so we need to make computed. Okay, computed, right? And then here I'm going to map those getter functions. So how can I do that? I can do map getters. First parameter is of course going to be the store name, so this time book store, and then the second parameter is going to be of type object, and here we can say get all books. Okay, and here what I'm going to say is, okay, the same functionality name which is present there, so we need to write the same inside the string. So I'll say get all books, and then we have couple of more method over there, so I'll say get book by id, right? So what are all methods we created over there? We have get all books, we have get book by id, right? And let's make one more, delete book by id. So I'll say instead of get, delete book by id, and then I'll say delete book by id, but we don't have that functionality ready on API, so let it be for now, we'll do that later. Let me save it and go back to book list page, and here we'll be having get all books, get book by id, right? This both method will be having. Okay, so the method name is going to be same as per what we defined in the actions. Okay, so now we are going to use this get all books, and how we can use that, let's see. So next what I'm going to do is, what I should do, I will okay, so I will just use that getters here. So I just binded those getters here, since that is of course reactive data, so as soon as those get all books will change, right? The state variable changes, this getter will be reflecting those data, right? But we need to define this get columns config as well here. So this column config is specific to this book, so I can say we can define those into let's say what I'm going to do is I'm going to define this inside data, and here I'll say, let's say columns config. Why I'm doing columns config, I'll tell you that. So columns config, first let's define as an array, of course, and then we will be having all those column listed here. So I'll say column key, very first thing it's going to be serial number, right? That is why we use those serial number, column key and all over there. Okay, so next I'm going to say, okay, column name will also be there, so I'll say column name, and column name is going to be like this, serial number. Cool. And then we'll have sort as well. If we want to sort, then that sort icon will get visible, or else it won't be visible. So I'll say okay, sort is true, right? And then sort key also we need to provide, so I'll say sort key, and I'll say okay, serial number, right? But serial number, based on the serial number we are not going to sort, so I'll make it false. Okay, then next what I'm going to say is icon. Do we need to show some icon? No, I don't want to show any icon over there. And then show icon will also be there, so I'll say false. Okay, and this column should be visible, so I'll say is visible is true. Cool. So the same configuration we are going to make for all those columns which we are going to show. I will just copy, paste, 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 right? So this time I'm going to say okay, serial number is there, then we'll have underscore id as well, we'll have what, book name as well, so I'll say book name. Okay, and then we'll have book code as well there, right? So next what we'll be having, let's say price also we are going to show. All right, and then what else we need to show? Price will be there. Okay, what else, what data we have in add book actually? So let's go back and see. So I can see directly from here, so book name, book code, author we can show, and then price, published year. So I'm going to say okay, author we are going to say author, right? And then what else? Author, price is already there, published year I can say, so I'll say published published year, and then status will also be there, so I'll say status. Not only status, but we need one more over there, so but first thing is the status, and then I'll say created date as well, when this book has been created. So I'll say not like this, I'll say created date. Fine. Now I will change all the respective column accordingly, so I'll say ID, and then here I will say book name, right? I'll say book code, so I'll say book code over here, and then here I'll say price, but this price should have, when we are going to show the actual value, so we should have certain symbol, and we are going to do that in the next in the down below computed property. I will show you how we can do that, so that way you can make it more flexible, that way you will have full control of this app table. Okay, so I'll say, okay, not price, but I'll say book price, so it's going to be book price, and then book price you can say, or just book price. Here I'm going to just say name and then code of the book and then price, and then I'm going to say okay author, and I'm going to say okay published year, let's say, and then here I'm going to say status, right? Cool. And then I'm going to say created date as well, so I'll say created on. Fine. Now the sort key also we need to define, so here of course it's number, but we are not going to sort for this, so maybe make it as a false, rest of the thing will make it as a true, because we should be able to sort next item. So I'll say true, right? I'll just save it, and then name should be sortable, so I need to provide the key on which we are going to sort it, so I'll say book name, and then here I'm going to say book code, alright, and then I'll say book price, right, and then here I'll say author, right, and here I'll say published year, right, and then here I'll say status, right, and here I'll say created date. Now in this sorting case we need to make a show icon as a true, so what I'm going to do here is I'll just say true. Let me select all those, and then I'll say make it true, and then of course the column will get visible over there. Okay, sorry, so I'll say true, true, right. Now the column will be visible. So this is our default configuration for showing all those columns, but then what we will do here is we'll create one functionality where in the computed. Okay, so now I'll say get columns config, right, since we have binded this key over there in the template. So I'll say get columns config, and this time I'm going to say okay constant. Okay, I'll say, let's say column config equals to this dot column config. Fine. And then what I'm going to say is okay, I will say, let's say not symbol, but I'm going to say, for example, price index, price column index. Why I need that? Because I want to show certain symbol on the specific column. So I'll say price column index, and if you want more to be there, you can attach more column symbol over there. So this time I'm going to say okay, this dot column config, right, dot find index, right, and here I'll say column, and then this column dot column key is going to be, since we know that price, not price but the book price should show certain currency symbol, right. So if that is the case, price column index is there, which is greater than -1, that means what we are going to do is we are going to attach a symbol in that specific object. So I'm going to say, okay, price column index equals to, not equals to, but dot symbol. I'm going to attach new key symbol, and then this time the symbol is going to be what? So let's go back in here, and I will just search for, let's say, dollar. So I think dollar will always be there, so I will just use dollar. Okay, you can use this way. You can, if you want, if you have more columns, so that you can show multiple symbols over there, of course you can do in this way, and this is highly flexible. You can put any symbol over there in any of the column. Cool. So I'll say dollar, and then finally I'm going to return the config. Right, we are now done with this, and then let me just save it. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start this Vue application. So I'll say Vue serve, and we will see that in UI if this works. So just wait for a few seconds, and we should be able to test all those functionalities. Right, so we understood how we can create a app table component or any component from scratch, and what are all those functionalities which we want to make, right? So this is how we can make it, and this is of course highly flexible. And if it can be more flexible, of course you're free to do that. You can use this component in your actual project, or where you're working, or if you're starting your own project, so in that also you can do the same. So let's see if this works. Okay, we have this page loaded, but for the safer side I'm going to open this inspector tool as well. I'll go back in console to see if we are getting any error over there. No, we are not getting. So very first thing, we need to log in so that we'll get those pages options. So I'll say zdhussain21 and gmail.com. We need to remove this console actually. Okay, so just you can remind me in the comment section so that I can remove this console. So I'll say password, and once I'll click on login, we should have that option visible book list, right? So now if I'll go back to book list, you can see we have that column visible over there, right? But there's certain error over there. That means unknown getter get all books. This getter should be there so that we can access those all list item, right? But the good thing is we are able to see that column, and we should able to resize it. You can see, right? That's the beauty of this application and this component, right? And by default we are showing of course no record font, and this of course doesn't look much better. But if you want to show something, let's say you want to show icon or an image that shows that record is not there, that will be highly appreciable, and that will be actually the good way. Okay, and also we have this show limit as well, so we can change those limit. Let me show you if that works. So I'll say 20. You can say limit is not 10, but it should be the actual value 30. 10, it still is showing 10. Why? Because let me go back in the code, and in app table I believe the value is going to be same, right? So let me just make it 20, 30, and then 50. I'll save it once more. I'll come back here, I'll refresh this page, and then you should be able to see the selected value, actually what we selected over there. So I'll just remove this, and I'll say 20. You can see 20, right? I'll say 50. You can see 50. I'll say 30. You can see 30 over there. So based on this limit, we are going to again fetch the data. That's cool, right? So let's fix this. Why we are not getting data? Of course we are not getting data because we have not triggered those get all API, and we have that error. So go back in code, and now there's a new concept introduced here. Where should we call that API, right? So as soon as we know that as soon as this book list page will load, we need to call that API, right? But where? That's the question. So every application is having its own life cycle. What does life cycle means is, let's say you are running this application. So your application is now in running state. okay. And if you are just close this application, that means you close this, your application is closed state. So each of this, in every application we have lot of state over there, that is called the life cycle method. And then life cycle will have its own method, so that whenever that action triggers, whenever that, you know, functional, not functionality, whenever that, you can say, event occurs, right, those functionality will get triggered. That is called life cycle method, right? So in Vuejs we have lot of life cycle method. For example, we have before route enter, then we have route enter, then we have before updated, not before updated, we have before mounted, then we have mounted, then we have before updated, and we have before no, updated, and before unmounted and unmounted. So these all life cycle we have in Vue.js. What does that mean? In each every, you know, every stage of the application comes under a life cycle. So when I'll say I am going to just load this page, that means you are going to change the route, right? So your route will change from here, and then before landing to this page there will be a change in the route. That is where before route and before route enter will get executed, that functionality will get triggered, right? Then we talked about route enter. That means as soon as this route enters, that functionality is going to be executed, route entered, right? Similarly, when this page is going to be ready, when this, or when all of this component or elements is going to be shown on UI, right, that we can say it happens in mounted life cycle, okay. So that's correct only. So whenever this page loads, we should have all those UI ready, so that we can start feeding the data which we want to be displayed dynamically, right? Then by this concept we should call our API once this page loaded successfully, and the page loaded successfully only after, not after, but in the updated. So this time what I'm going to say is there won't be any method block, or there won't be any computed. We can directly define those method here, lifecycle method. And I would encourage you, I would recommend you to go through each of the lifecycle method. And if you want to read documentation about that, you can read about that, and you can play around those lifecycle methods, okay. So I'm going to use mounted in this case. So this will be a function, no more blocks, okay. So I'll say okay, that's fine. So you need to just load this. I just need to make it async, so that I should be able to call await this dot. Okay, now we should have a functionality, not functionality, we created this actions method, right, get all books. But if I'll go back in getters, we have get books, right? So that's why we are getting error. And in this case getter will be having name of get books, right? So let's remove this, and this will work fine actually, because we aliased the name and we have used dev. So this is completely legal in Vue.js. And then we need map action as well, so that we can trigger those APIs, right? So here what I'll say, import map actions as well, but we need to map those functionality in the method, right? So on top I'm going to say okay, map actions, right, not like this, map actions. And the first parameter is obviously going to be the store name. So I'll say bookstore, and then the object. So here we can say okay, fetch all books. Let's say API name I'm going to put as fetch, okay. You can name it whatever you want, it's completely legal. So fetch all books, but you need to make sure this API name or method name is not going to collide with other method name, okay. So I'll say get all books, that is the method we created in actions, right? And then couple of more method. I'll say fetch book by ID. So I'll say fetch book by ID. Even we don't need that, so we don't need that here as well. So I'll just say fetch all books, and then here what I'll say, okay, this dot fetch all books. And we won't be passing any filter over there, it will be empty. Let me just save it and go back to UI. You can see it automatically get triggered, this API, right? So why we are getting error over here? Let me just refresh it and see what happens. Still we are getting 3071. Why is that so? Is it landing on this route? Post method is there and then books. So let's go back here and see redirecting request books/books. Why is that so? So we need to debug that server application here, and let me go back in routes. Here you can see, okay, books is there. I have passed books, and then I'll go back here, and then here we can see that empty. Okay, for now just make it get all books. Let me just save it and I'll change the URL as well there in the client so that it will reach on the exact route. So for that, where we need to go is we need to open this API folder, and then in the URL I'm going to say okay, books, get books URL, right? So here in this case I'm going to say okay, just place this route as well. So I'll just save it and go back to UI, and then let's see if that works. You can see get all books is getting triggered, but what error we are getting over there? Still we are getting issues, but this time connection refused. But why connection has been refused? Okay, the application was not running actually, Golang application. That's why we got that error. But let's see if that works. Yeah, you can see we got all books, right? We got the data, and then the data is in this format, but still we didn't get those records here. Why is that so? This is fine, right? So for that, what we need to do, let's go back in DevTools, view DevTools, and we will start debugging why is that so. So I'll go back in Vuex store and I'll click on book store, and I'll see if book is there or not. Yes, book is there, but in this case we have all those Axios kind of things is present there instead of the actual data. Actual data is there, but it is overwrapped by Axios object and all, right? So we just need the actual data, right? We need to omit this all things. Instead we just need to return the success or error response, and for that there's one more concept which I'm going to use. That of course we can do that on this layer, actions layer, and then each of the method we need to do that, right? But that is actually not good way of doing that. Instead what we can do is we can use interceptor for that. And what interceptor is actually, so interceptor is nothing but whenever we are triggering any request, whenever there's going to be a network request out of this application, what it will do is at the final stage before going out, it will intercept that request. It will catch those requests and it will say, okay, hold on, you can feed some extra data in that request, and then you will allow those requests to go out. So then that API will have, or that request will have more data which you have fed, and this is the centralized way of doing those things, right? And then same thing, if the data is coming back to the client, right, coming back to your application, you're just going to intercept that data and you're going to check, okay, you have all these things, and then only you can come inside my application. That's what we are going to do here, right? We don't need to do all those kind of things on each of the functionality. Instead we'll do that all at once. And how we are going to do that, let's see that in action. So for that I'm going to say, okay, let's define one more thing, and I'll name it interceptor. Interceptor.js. Cool. And what it will do is actually it will intercept all those requests, right? So without wasting much time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import Axios, and this concept will always be remain same. Whether you are going to use Vue.js, you are going to use Android, you are going to use Angular or React or whatever framework you want, this interceptor concept will always remain same. Okay. Syntax may differ, way of doing it may differ, but the concept always remains same. So here I'm going to say okay, Axios I'm going to use, since I'm using Axios library, so I will be using Axios interceptor here. I'll say okay, export a method setup view, not view interceptor, right? Okay, so here I'm going to say okay, there needs to be have router over there. I need router as well as a store, so I'll say router, store as well as router, right? Now here what I'll say is Axios is having interceptors object over there, and then where we are going to intercept on request dot use, I'll say use, right? And then here I will be passing one function, callback function, which will be having configuration. Okay, and this is completely optional. If you don't need it, you can just omit this. But why I took this store as well as router, because let's say if we want to modify certain stored variable, we should be able to do that here at a centralized point. And also if we want to route to somewhere, let's say if API is returning 401, that is unauthorized, that means you need to log in, right? So for that I will use this router and log in back to login page, not login but route back to login page. Cool, that is how we are going to make it. Okay, and whatever we are following here is as per industry standard, it's as per enterprise level application. This is how they are using this is how they are designing their application, and along the way you are also learning how you can design the application, but not fully, of course, partially. When I said partially, that means not partially. Of course, you will have all those understanding, all those concepts ready in place. You will be advanced in creating application, but there's a couple of more, design pattern and couple of more system design concepts which you need to learn additionally to, you can be very smart in that. You can be you can excel in that field. So I'll say okay, don't do anything over here for now. I'll just say return config. Once I'll define the concept of token, then we are going to modify this. Okay, so and then we need error as well here, so I'll say okay, error function will also be there, and in that case I'm going to just do return promise.reject, and then I'll reject with the error. Cool. Now I will use Axios.interceptor. Here I have intercepted the request only, which is going to go out of this application, right? Now I need to intercept the response as well. For that, what I'll say, interceptors dot response dot use, right? So here I will just intercept the response like this, and then what I'll say is I will be having, not having, but I'll say, let's say, what I need to say, I will say will be having response, so I'll say response instead of response. I'll say okay, response code, let's say. So I'll say response code. Cool. And I'm going to take out those response code from the response. So I'll say response dot data dot status code, right? Since I'm returning a status code in the response, and you can verify that as well. So let's go back in network tab. You can see that status code over there, right? So I'm going to use the same code over here, and then I will say switch to this response code, not response but the response code, right? Now you have switched to this response code. Next, what you need to do is you need to match it with certain condition, right? For example, let's say you are matching with 200, okay, not 200 but let's say 201. In that case, what you want to say is okay, 201, when we are returning 201 only in case of delete or update, right? So for now let it be as it is, and then finally what we are going to do is we are going to return promise dot resolve, but now we are going to format those data, right? Fetch out the actual data only, fetch out the actual data which we want to return. So we don't have to worry about all those wrapper data which we saw in the Vuex store in the Vue dev tools, right? So here I'm going to say just return response dot data. That's it. Cool. So finally we have return response here, and then we need one more thing over here in case of error as well, right? So in case of error as well, we should handle those errors. So I'll say async, okay, I'll say error, right? We'll be having error as well in the response. So how we are going to handle the response error, right? So I'm just going to say in that case just return promise dot reject and then the error, actual error, right? So this is how we can, intercept the request and intercept the response as well, right? We have intercepted both request as well as response. Now let me just save it, and then we need to register this function somewhere so that we can provide store as well as router. So where we are going to register this, of course, in the main file of the application, Vue application. So here what I'll say is, okay, import this function, import setup view interceptor, and then provide those. Let me say that here I will say I'll call this function, and then it needs to have store as well as router, and we have access of a store and router at one place here in the main application. I'm sorry. So I'll save it, right? We are done with those data. Now let me go back to UI. I will just refresh it and let's see if that works. So we got the data, but still that is not visible. So let's see what was the issue actually. I'll go back here in the DevTools and I'll click on bookstore. We can see, okay, data is there, but this time still we don't have the actual data. So for that I'm going to go back in the actions, and here I'm going to say, okay, we don't need book here actually, we don't, not book, sorry, okay, book.data I can say, and here also we can say books.data. Here also we can say book.data. Let me save it and go back to UI. It will refresh and we'll see, hopefully. Yeah, you can see here we have those data listed over here. That's cool, right? This is how we can make our component, we can make it highly flexible and highly customizable, right? So what's next we are going to do? Okay, let me just expand it and I'll show you how this will work. So you can see that if I'm making it small, it's getting hidden. So if you will just hover on this, you can see it is getting expanded automatically, right? And we should be able to see those data down below, right? So this is how you can make this application more flexible, and this is how it works. So next we are going to see, what we are going to see next is we are going to, okay, make it as a paginated data, but of course we have the price is not getting visible over there, because if we'll go in network tab, we'll see that price won't be there. Let me just open that, and you can see here we don't have price over there, it's coming as 0. So we'll rectify these issues. This is already occurs before, so we'll rectify these issues and then we'll proceed ahead in the program with the pagination, how we can show paginated data and all. It should be working in the same way, right? So that is it guys for this videos, and I will meet you in the next video.